Hey guys, the first thing I want to do is fix our register test. Well, not really fix it, but take one of the suggestions that you guys gave. I thought this was great, and we kind of have it broken up into different parts now, and Jest lets you do this in a better way. So instead of having test at the top here, we can call this describe. And this is going to basically describe a bunch of tests. So here we are registering a user, right? And we're basically testing the registering a user function in multiple different ways. And we can wrap each one in its own test block. So I can say, give it a string of what we're testing. And inside of that, I can do async code like so. And then I can move, like for example, this bit of code here. This is where I register a single user. And then I register another user and make sure that you can't have duplicate emails. So check that, we'll just say check for duplicate emails, and we don't really need the comment here now. And then we can do the same thing below. Now we can use test or we can use it. I'm going to use it because it's a little bit shorter. Both are the same thing. It is just aliased to test. Oops. And so let's do it here. So it check bad email, and let's make this asynchronous. And now we can check bad password. And now in doing this, we're going to have a nicer output as well. Give this a save, and this is our last one down here. So we're going to say check bad password and bad email. Async, and we take this chunk, put it in here. Okay, so now that we've basically split up our register tests into multiple little smaller tests, let's see what this looks like when we run. So yarn test. It should now have all these little tests printing out, and we should see exactly which register function fails now. And it just kind of makes it easier to tell. So here we can see register user, and then under register user we can see the individual tests. And actually this is kind of nice. We can see how long each test took, and we can see the duplicate emails took quite a bit longer than the rest of them with the 2 requests. Okay, cool. And maybe the server was like warming up and stuff or whatnot. I don't know. But that's not today's main topic. What I want to do today is work again on the register resolver. And what I want to do next is send an email to the user. And the reason why I want to send an email to the user is to make sure their email is actually legit and they own that email. And the way we do this is I don't want them to be able to log in, for example, before they have confirmed their email. So we're going to add an entity, or not an entity, we're going to add a field on our user. So I'm going to add a column here, column, and I'm going to call it, well, it's going to be of the type Boolean, and it's going to be called confirmed, and this is going to be a Boolean. And I'm also going to give it a default value of false. So this field will be whether the user has confirmed their email. So by default they haven't. And what we're going to do is we're going to send the user a link. And when they click on that link, we're going to turn confirmed to true. But if they never click on the link, then, you know, whatever. I won't let them log in because we checked they're not confirmed. So what we're going to build today is a function called create URL, or we'll call this create confirm email link. .ts. So we're going to export const create confirm email link. So what we're going to do is take the current URL, and the reason why we need the URL, so this might be, for example, HTTP localhost, or we might be running on, localhost 4000, or we might be on, I don't know, https:/mysite.com. So I want to take this as a parameter, and what I'm going to output is something like this. So we'll take whatever URL we have. So maybe it's this site, and we're going to append confirm, and then we're going to have basically an ID at the very end. And the ID at the very end, what we're going to do with that is store it in, I was originally going to store this in the database, but I think a better place for this is Redis. And we're going to be using that to store our session data anyway, so might as well double up and store this as well. And what this ID is basically just corresponds to the user, and I want the link to last 24 hours. And this is basically, I'm taking off of the Forgot Password cheat sheet for OWASP, where it talks about basically some best practices. So originally I've used like JWT tokens before, but one reason I don't want to use those is because I want to be able to, once the user has confirmed their email, they should not be able to click on the link anymore. Basically, it should be invalid, the string or the ID. In JWT tokens, you can't really invalidate the token anytime you want unless you store it somewhere. So we might as well store our own token. So that's what we're going to do. So here we're going to do a couple things. Basically, we just need to store a key pair, and for this, we first, to create the link, and this is really going to do two things, right? It's not just creating the link, it's also storing something in Redis. And so to store something in Redis, we're going to have to use a Redis client. And curious what you guys think about this. There's like two main Redis clients. There's this one called IO Redis, which I've used before and liked, but there's also another one called like Node Redis, I believe. And yeah, it's called Node Redis. There it is. I'm not sure which one's better. Both of them look really popular and used by a lot of people, so I'm going to use this one, but let me know in the comments below if you'd recommend the other one or vice versa. So we're going to install this. So yarn add IO Redis, and we can also go ahead and install the types for this, because I don't think it's written with TypeScript either. /IO Redis. Okay, cool. So what this URL thingy is going to do is first create an ID, and this ID, I'm thinking the best thing to use is UUID. So I know we just uninstalled this. We're going to reinstall this because it's just great for making IDs. So yarn add this ID, and I want to say we already installed the type for it. I don't think I uninstalled that. I didn't. So we don't have to reinstall the types. Alright, so step one, from UUID. Also, this is a trick one of you guys told me about. I can just import it like this instead of using the slash. So we'll go ahead and do that as well. So we'll say const ID is equal to version 4. Okay, and the other thing we need to pass to this function is the user ID. So user ID. So URL is going to be a string. User ID is also going to be a string. Okay, so we now have the ID, and why don't I, in start server over here, we need to create a Redis client, and we also need to pass the Redis client here. So we'll pass it as a third parameter in 1 second. So I'm going to just import, and we can just copy their hello world example. So import Redis from IO Redis, and we're going to have this in our create server here. So we'll create an instance to Redis, and I'm just going to pass this to our context. So I think just say context and then pass in Redis like that. And okay, so what is the type of this? Can we get that? Oh, it's any. There we go. All right, so this is a redis.redis, so let's copy that. So we want to take that as one of our parameters. Oops. Is that right? Was it capital R? Redis, both capital R's. Okay. And there we go. Redis only refers to a type but is being used as a namespace. There we go. Okay. I don't know if this is the right type. We might have to change this, but it looks good for now. So what I'm going to do is say redis.set, and we're going to set the ID here. And the second parameter is going to be the value, which is going to be the user ID. And then the third one, we're going to say EX, and this is for expiring. And I want this to expire after, I think 24 hours seems like a good amount of time. And this is in seconds. So I'm going to do 60 seconds. So we have a minute, and I want 60 minutes, and I want 24 hours. So that should be what, 30? Yep, I think that's correct. And so redis.set, I think this returns a promise. It doesn't tell us what it returns. I think it does. So I think I need to await it. And we'll say async. Okay. So after we set this ID, next thing that we want to do is actually return the string. So I'm going to return, and we're going to pass in the URL, have a slash confirm slash ID. And this is going to be the URL that the user clicks on. So when they click on this link, they're going to be taken to our server and go to this URL here. So now in my start server, I'm going to create an endpoint. Now you'll notice I'm not going to be using GraphQL for this. I find it just simpler to do this. I actually don't know if it's possible, at least without a front end, to do this with just GraphQL. And so I think it's easiest to just do this with REST. So I'm going to say server.express.get. And I looked this up because I haven't used Express in quite a while, at least making a GET route. So we can make a route like this, and we can put parameters like so, and then we can do request.parameters to get these parameters. So I can say /confirm /ID, and here we're going to say request res, and I think next is the last one. I actually don't even know if next is one for the get parameter. Okay, and then here what we're going to do is we're going to get that ID from request.params. And then when we get that ID, the next thing we want to do is say redis.get that ID. So const user ID is equal to await getting this Redis. So we'll do async. And then next thing after we get this, the user ID, is we're just going to set the confirmation. So we're going to say user.create, or not create, update. And we say what do we want to update by. So I want to update by the ID. So ID is equal to user ID. And then here we set what we want to change. I want to change the confirm or confirmation. Or I think I said confirmed is what I called it. Yep. And we're going to set that to true. And we're going to wait. And then res.send. Okay. Now if we were using this for real, what we would want to do is like redirect them to our front end, but we don't have a front end yet, so I think this works okay. There's one last part of this, and that is in our register resolver is to actually call create confirm email link. So let's do that real quick. So really after we save the user in the database, assuming that worked okay, we're going to create a confirm email link. So we need to pass in the URL. We'll talk about how we create the URL in a second. Well, we need to pass in the user ID, which is going to be user.id. We need to pass in Redis, which we're getting from this guy up here, the context. And I'm going to wait because it is a promise that we return from that. And this is going to be the URL. So we're going to do something with this URL or this link very soon. Okay, it didn't like this. Oh, because this is our context. For now, or I guess we can add this to our context. So now in our context we have Redis, which is Redis. Okay, so we have a single thing in our context. Perfect. So how do we get this URL, right? Well, I looked this up and this looked like a nice way to do it. So on the Stack Overflow, we can get this from the request. I have in the past set like environment variable, but I think this will be a little bit easier. So whatever they requested, we can get the protocol in the host and use that as the URL. So let's go ahead and back to our index over here, start server. I think they actually just changed this, so now the request is one of the parameters. Sorry, this is the wrong thing. I hope this was the context. We want to touch context. There we are. Here's context. So from context, we want to return an object now. And I forget, I think it works like this. So whenever I come across something where I'm like, I don't remember how this works, what I'll do is in Visual Studio Code, I can right click, go to definition, and I can now see how this guy works. So I can see one of the things is props. I can click on props. I can see, oh look, I can either pass context a object called context or a context callback. Let's see what context callback does. Alright, well it takes some number of parameters and then I return a context. So what are these parameters that I get? Oh nice, it has the request object, which is exactly what I want. So let's use that. So parameters request, and so here what I'm going to return is the URL, which is going to be exactly what we got from those guys. So request, and the reason why we didn't get the original URL at the end is I don't care what's after the slash, all I want is the host. So for example, it might be localhost 4000 /GraphQL. I don't care about this bit right here. That's what original URL would have given us. So all I care is about this part and the HTTP part, which is what this gives us. Okay, so now I have the URL passed into the context as well, and now I can update my type. Okay, so I now have the URL, which is a string. So now my resolver over here, have URL, we'll pass the URL in. Okay, so this was a lot of stuff, so I want to just like recap everything. So let's go through how this is going to work. So let's start with start server. So now whenever we start up our server, we also connect to Redis. And we basically can use this to do any kind of Redis commands we interact with this Redis object. We're also getting the current URL of the server, so whether we're on localhost, whether we're on mysite.com or whatever. We pass these two as context so we can use it in our resolvers. So now in our resolver over here, I have those two things. And at the very end, after I save my user, so they've successfully registered, I want to create a link which then I can then email to them. So this create confirm email link, we're taking the URL, the ID of the user, and the reason why we need the ID of the user is we need to know who the heck we're updating, right? Whose email needs to be confirmed, who are we confirming. So to actually do this, we're just creating an ID. I'm doing this as a UUID because it's safe to put in the URL, and it's also unique. Here I am setting an ID or setting a key value in Redis, and I'm saying it should expire after 24 hours or 1 day. And I have the ID which we set here, and the value is the user. So whenever we fetch this, we're going to get the user ID back. And then I'm returning the actual URL, which is the URL/confirm and the ID. And really what we might want to do here is really just return the ID, and then the person creates the link from that. I'll think about how I want to do this. I think this is probably fine for now, but we are also returning the string of what the user would click on if I sent them an email. So when I send them an email, I want to send them this link now. And then finally, when the user would to click on this link, what's going to happen is they're going to come over to this over here, and we're going to get the ID from the parameter in the URL. We're going to get it from Redis. This would give us the user ID, right? Because that's what we stored. And I guess it's going to return null otherwise. So maybe we do like a little if statement, if user ID, otherwise res.send invalid, something like that. But if we do get a valid user ID, all we're doing is we're changing user ID to confirmed. Or we find that user and we update them that they are confirmed. And so when logging in users, I now can just check this field and see whether they're confirmed or not. Now, I think this stuff works, but this was a pretty long video already, so I'm going to stop it now. And in the next video, we'll write tests for all this and make sure everything functions and works all well. Between now and then, I would recommend installing Redis because we're going to be starting this up and using it very shortly. So that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching.